In 2008, in Edmonton, Canada, a man named Johnny Altinger left his home to meet a woman he had been speaking to online, and he was never seen again. His last messages showed no sign of concern, and there was no indication that anything was wrong before he arrived at the meeting location. When he disappeared, there was no body, no confirmed crime scene, and no immediate evidence to prove that a crime had even taken place. The only trace left behind was a digital trail, emails and messages that led investigators to a single meeting point, a garage. For days, the case remained unclear, with no physical confirmation of what had happened after he arrived. Then, investigators searched a suspect's property and recovered a laptop that had not been initially considered critical. Inside that laptop was a document, a detailed script describing a planned murder, written step by step. The plan matched the real-world evidence so precisely that it transformed a missing person case into a fully reconstructed crime, driven by one digital file.
In October 2008, in Edmonton, Canada, Johnny Altinger arranged to meet a woman he had been communicating with online through a dating-style interaction that appeared normal and consistent. The messages exchanged showed a planned meeting with a specific time and location agreed upon without any indication of risk or suspicion. Johnny left his home and drove to the designated location, which was a residential property with a detached garage that had been prepared in advance. The communication stopped shortly after he confirmed his arrival, marking the last verified point of contact before he disappeared. There were no follow-up messages, no calls, and no activity from his accounts after that moment, creating an immediate digital endpoint. The location, later identified as the same detached garage, became the last known place where he had been seen or contacted. At the time, there was no witness who could confirm what happened after he entered the property, leaving the timeline dependent entirely on digital records. The person he believed he was meeting did not exist, and the online identity used to arrange the meeting was later found to be fabricated. This revealed that the interaction had been controlled from the beginning, guiding him toward a specific location under false pretenses. This was the last normal moment where a routine online meeting transitioned into a controlled setup with no visible warning signs.
After arriving at the property, Johnny moved toward the same detached garage which had been prepared in advance as a controlled environment. The garage was set up to appear normal from the outside, but inside it had been arranged to restrict movement and visibility. As he entered the same garage, the attacker was already positioned inside, waiting for the exact moment of entry. The attack began immediately after Johnny crossed the threshold, leaving no time for reaction or escape. The confined layout of the garage allowed the attacker to maintain control and prevent any external visibility during the assault. There were no witnesses nearby, and the enclosed structure ensured that the event remained contained within the same space. The sequence was brief and controlled, with no prolonged struggle extending beyond the interior of the garage. Once the attack was completed, the focus shifted to removing visible traces and managing the scene. The same garage became both the location of the crime and the point where evidence was initially concealed. This was the point of no return, where the controlled setup ensured that Johnny would not leave the location he had entered. After Johnny failed to return home, concern escalated when he did not respond to calls or messages, which was unusual given his normal communication patterns. Friends and family attempted to reach him repeatedly, but there was no activity on his phone, email, or any of his accounts after the meeting time. His vehicle, the same dark gray four-door sedan, was later found abandoned, confirming that he had not returned from the meeting. This shifted the situation from a delayed response to a confirmed missing person case with a defined last known location. Investigators began by reconstructing his last movements using digital records, including emails and message exchanges that led to the meeting. The communication trail pointed directly to the same residential property with the detached garage where he had gone that night. Police visited the location, but at that stage, there was no immediate visible evidence outside the property to confirm a crime. Without a body or clear signs of violence beyond the digital trail, the case remained uncertain in its classification. The investigation focused on establishing whether he had left the location or if something had occurred inside the same garage. At this stage, the case was defined by a single fact: he entered the location and there was no evidence that he ever left. At this stage, the case remained classified as a missing persons investigation because there was no confirmed body and no direct physical evidence proving a homicide. Investigators returned to the same residential property and focused on the detached garage as the last known point of contact. Initial inspection of the garage did not reveal obvious signs of violence, suggesting that any activity inside had been controlled or concealed. The lack of visible evidence outside the structure made it difficult to justify immediate escalation to a full homicide case. Attention shifted to the individual connected to the property, but there was no immediate confession or clear admission of wrongdoing. Without strong physical evidence, the investigation relied heavily on digital records and behavioral inconsistencies. The suspect's responses raised concern, but they were not sufficient on their own to establish a direct link to a crime. At this point, the investigation faced a limitation: a defined location with suspicion, but no clear proof of what had occurred inside. This created a gap between what was suspected and what could be proven, slowing the progression of the case. The garage remained the central location, but the absence of confirmed evidence kept the investigation in an uncertain position. The investigation escalated when a fire was reported at the same detached garage, drawing attention back to the location that had already been identified as the last known point of contact. Investigators returned and began a more detailed forensic examination of the same garage, focusing on areas that may have been altered or cleaned. This time, traces of blood were detected on surfaces that had previously appeared normal, indicating that a violent event had taken place inside. Further analysis revealed patterns consistent with attempts to clean and remove evidence, suggesting that the scene had been deliberately managed after the attack. The presence of blood evidence directly contradicted the earlier assumption that there was no confirmed crime scene. This shifted the classification of the case from a missing person investigation to a confirmed homicide investigation. The same detached garage was now established as the primary crime scene, linking the disappearance directly to that location. Investigators also identified inconsistencies in the suspect's account, further increasing suspicion around his involvement. The combination of physical evidence and behavioral discrepancies created a stronger foundation for advancing the case. The investigation had now reached a point where evidence existed, but it still needed a definitive connection to reconstruct exactly what had happened. Investigators obtained a warrant to search electronic devices connected to the suspect, focusing on computers and storage media that could reveal intent or planning. Inside the same detached garage, they recovered a laptop that had not been fully examined during earlier stages of the investigation. When the device was analyzed, investigators found a document titled SK Confessions, which immediately drew attention due to its detailed structure. The document described a planned murder scenario step by step, including how the victim would be lured, controlled, and eliminated inside a garage. Each element written in the file corresponded directly with the physical evidence already discovered in the same garage. The method of luring through online communication matched the digital trail that led Johnny to the location. The description of the controlled environment aligned with the confined layout of the same detached garage where the crime occurred. The sequence of events outlined in the document mirrored the timeline investigators had reconstructed from the evidence. This established that the document was not fictional, but a detailed plan that had been executed in reality. The laptop provided the missing link, connecting intent, planning, and physical evidence into a single, complete narrative of the crime. With the digital evidence and physical findings aligned, investigators reconstructed the full sequence of events, even though Johnny Altinger's body was never fully recovered. Mark Twitchell was arrested and charged, with the case built around the direct connection between his written plan and the actual crime. The document SK Confessions detailed not just a fictional idea, but a structured method that matched the luring, attack, and cleanup process used in reality. During the trial, Twitchell claimed that the document was fictional writing, but investigators demonstrated that its details aligned precisely with the evidence found in the same detached garage. The prosecution established that the online identity used to contact Johnny was created and controlled by Twitchell, linking the initial interaction directly to him. His motive was not based on personal conflict, but on a constructed idea influenced by fictional narratives, including the concept of creating and acting out a controlled killing scenario. This showed that the crime was planned in advance, with intent documented before it was carried out, rather than being a spontaneous act. Despite the absence of a fully recovered body, the combination of digital planning, physical evidence, and reconstructed timeline was sufficient to prove the case beyond doubt. He was convicted of first-degree murder, confirming that the written plan had been executed in reality. What began as a disappearance with no visible crime was ultimately solved by one decisive detail, a digital file that connected intent, action, and outcome into a complete and proven sequence.